So we're putting in the casing now, and you have two choices for this. One option is to serge around the entire top portion. Um, I don't prefer that method actually. I like to finish my casing with a double turned hem. So I'm going to start by turning the top edge back 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm just going to press it. And so you'll do this all the way around where you press it under 1/4 of an inch. And I just think this looks a little bit more finished, a little bit nicer than when you just serge around the edge. But you have the choice, you have the option, so whichever one you prefer to do, that's really fine. And you won't get graded any differently in class if you choose one or the other. They're graded the same. So now if you have finished either serging or doing your 1/4 of an inch turn at the top of the casing, you're ready to move on to the next step. So you're going to put your seam gauge on 1.5 inches, and that is going to be the size of the casing, and that's where your 1-inch elastic will be fed through. So you've got to make sure that it's plenty big, otherwise it is really a struggle to get the elastic in there. So you'll want to measure 1.5 inches. And the other thing that's important is when we get over to the machine here in just a minute, when you actually sew the casing in place, that you don't do too wide of a seam, because that could also interfere with you being able to get that elastic fed through the casing really easily. Okay, so you'll just measure and press 1.5 inches all the way around, and you want to make sure that that 1/4 inch part that we had previously pressed under, that it stays under, so that you have no raw edges showing at all. Now, if you finished the edge with a serged seam, you'll just see that serged seam right down here at the bottom, so you won't have it turned under. That serged edge will just be what you measure from to the fold at 1.5 inches. So this again will be the casing. This is where the elastic is going to go through, and the elastic will be what holds the pants in place. So I know a lot of you, as you have tried these on, you have felt like, wow, these are really too big. And remember, we just mainly wanted to make sure we were fitting around the hips and not making the hips too tight, because we could always take in around the waist when we put the elastic in. Okay, so almost done there. All right, similar to when you make a pillow or anything you're gonna mark, and I don't have my pins here right this second, but you're gonna mark yourself a spot that you want your elastic to finish in. So let's see here. I'm gonna look at the back, find the back of my shorts. Okay, I'm looking for this seam right here. This one is longer on the inside. This seam that runs right here, that's longer, so that's gonna be my back. So right here is where I'm going to put double pins. And so I would start sewing at 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and I'm gonna make sure to back stitch, and I'll stitch all the way around until I get to this point, and then I'll back stitch there also. So that's just gonna be the opening right there that I'm able to feed the elastic through. One thing that you'll probably want to do is slide the arm off of your sewing machine so that you can have your circular piece slide over the edge really easy. Okay, and for this we're going to stay on a stitch 2, and I want it to be a stitch, yeah, I'm going to turn to a stitch 2. Okay, and then I'm going to look at the opening in the presser foot right here as my guide. And I'll want to back stitch where I start, where I stop. Okay, there we go. Alright, so I just finished sewing the top stitch right along here. So the shorts are still open. I can move that. I don't want to accidentally sew those two pieces together. We've still got to be able to get in them somehow. So the opening that I left is right here. It's probably about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 across. You could have it a little further open, but that's where I'm going to be able to slide the elastic in. So you'll want to measure your elastic around your waist, around the part of your waist where you think you'll be wearing your shorts, so where it would fit comfortably for you. And then you'll want to measure the piece of elastic where it fits tightly in that spot, but you aren't stretching it out too much, where you measure. And then you want to cut the piece just 1 inch longer than you need. Unfortunately, I'm at home, and so I don't have a long enough piece of elastic to work with right now, but I'm just going to show you. To get started, you would just take a safety pin. It needs to be a pretty good size one. And you want to put it through the end of your elastic, but not too close to the end. If I put the safety pin right up here, then it might start to unravel the elastic and rip out as you're putting it through the casing, and that can be kind of frustrating. So I've got my safety pin in the elastic. I'm going to look at the direction of my seam here, so I want to push my safety pin going the opposite, or the same way that my seam is laying. I want to go that direction. And to push it through, you're just going to push on the end of the safety pin, kind of gather it up, gather, gather, pull. Push it in, gather, gather, pull. And eventually, I'm kind of doing that backwards, push it, and then you pull. So you gather it up for a second, and then pull. And eventually it's just going to come all the way out the other side. You might remember doing this back in creative sewing when you made a drawstring bag for all of your supplies, or you made the stuff sack that had a zippered pocket on the front of it. For those items, we also made a casing that had some kind of drawstring fed through a casing. So that's the same idea. So you'll want to just push on the safety pin, push, push, and then pull it through. So my elastic now is starting to fill up the casing, and I'll just keep pushing it through till it comes out to the other end of the opening. So we're almost there. I just need to push the safety pin just a little bit further, and there it comes out the end. So now what you want to do is you want to make sure that your elastic doesn't get twisted while it's in there. It needs to lay flat and not twist around. That can be pretty obnoxious when you've got a twisted elastic in your waistband. Okay, so I just take my two ends, and you measured 1 inch larger than you needed. So these two pieces are going to overlap. By 1 inch. Okay. So now we need to secure that. There's lots of ways to do this. Typically I would do this kind of pattern. So I'm going to start sewing right here. I'll stitch down, pivot, cross over, stitch across, stitch back up this side, pivot, and cross over. So then it's kind of one rectangular shape. I could go down, diagonal, down, diagonal. So there's a lot of different designs you could do. It's just important to secure both ends of the elastic. Okay, so I'm going to do that really quickly. I'll show you what it looks like to be finished with that step, and then what to do next. So not a perfect job, but it got the job done. So both of the ends of the elastic are secure, and I just went around in like a rectangular shape. So that's holding that together. And now I can just ease it into the casing. I should just be able to kind of tighten up my shorts. Okay, and then next I need to go to my machine and stitch between the two opening positions, just another top stitch just to close that part of the seam up. So you will want to make sure that you have your hem exactly the length that you want it. Hopefully prior to this you have tried on your shorts and trimmed off any excess of the hem that you don't need. And so now we're going to roll up the hem, and for this you're going to be turning back 1/4 inch again. This is the same measurement that I did when I did my casing. So we do 1/4 inch the first hem. This is a double turn. 1/4 inch, and then you will turn it back another inch. And this could be, you could do a smaller hem if you want to. You could do a wider hem if you want to here. I just think the 1 inch is nice because it's not too narrow. And then also it allows you, if you didn't cut your shorts down as much as you had hoped, that you've got some room to work with. Okay, so that's why I do the double turn and a 1 inch hem. Alright, so for this part you don't need any pins. You're just turning it 1/4 inch. And I've got a really good iron. I just bought a new iron at home and it is awesome. So the ones at school may not iron this nicely right away. You may have to spend a little more time on it. You may want some steam, and just work with it until it folds under really nice and has a nice crisp crease on it. That's one thing, if you do start sewing it at home on your own, investing in a really nice iron is going to be a really great thing for you, because it just makes sewing easier. The better the iron you have, the easier it is to press everything, the nicer quality everything will turn out for you. Okay, so now from this point we're going to use the seam gauge at 1 inch, and which is really not that big. But we're going to turn back again. We're getting towards the inside or towards the wrong side. We're going to measure that 1 inch casing. There we go. And I said casing. This is the hem. So we're going to do 1 inch all the way around the bottom. And I'm just going to put a few pins in just to hold it in place. Because I do have a really nice iron, I don't have to pin as much. And in fact, sometimes when I'm sewing, I really don't use that many pins anymore. If it's the first time I'm making something, I usually use a lot of pins, or certain steps I might. But for something like this, if I'm pressing really, really well, and I'm just paying attention as I'm sewing to hold that the hem in place in line with the iron or where I've pressed it, then sometimes I just don't use pins, just because I do, then you're wasting time pulling them out. Okay, but you all might want to use pins, because just still, some of you are not quite ready yet to not have those. All right, so I'm almost done going all the way around, and I'm just going to show this on one leg, and then you'll repeat the same thing on the other side. All right, so I've pinned in place my 1 inch double turn hem, 1/4 inch first, 1 inch next, and then now I can go over and do a top stitch along here to finish it off. You can do a second top stitch around the bottom, just gives it more of a decorative finish. You can do the same thing around the casing also, just to give it a decorated look. So there we have our finished pair of shorts. You've got to press your shorts really well, and you want to make sure that your hems are even. So that would be something that you could look at right now, is making sure that those are nice and even when you're turning under If you accidentally did one too wide and the other too narrow, they might not be even, so you could go ahead and adjust that and fix it now. Go through all over the shorts and trim off any threads that you hadn't clipped previously. Again, press them really nicely, and then you have a scoring guide to fill out and turn in.